But I am stepping in for her today because she had business elsewhere. So she asked me to step in for her, and I'm absolutely delighted to be here on her behalf. And my guest today is none other than Dustin Bolander, and we're going to be talking about all things cybersecurity insurance. So, Dustin, can you give a quick introduction to the audience about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Two-time MSP owner. Actually have a MSP in Austin, Texas still that I'm a crazy person and we service almost entirely lawyers.
Well, you
Then
are nuts.
also
Yeah.
after doing, I know. It's everybody runs away from stuff and I run to it, which brings us to the second part. Spent the last couple of years building insurance channel programs. And then at the end of last year, launched Beltex, and we are the first MSP friendly policy for the customers of MSPs. Super high security requirements, and then the MSP actually gets pulled into the claims process and reimbursed in many cases. So,
Well, I've had a lot of conversations with you, Dustin, and I know that you've got such an immense amount of wealth, inside knowledge about the insurance space, and you're an MSP times two. So I can't really think of many other people better equipped than you to be able to help navigate this conversation. Speaking of conversations, if you are tuned in via LinkedIn or YouTube and you have any questions, because we do want to try to make this as interactive as possible, please drop them in the comments. We have someone in the background who is checking out those comments, and we'll be transferring them into the Q&A session here. But if you joined us via the webinar link that probably came in via your email, there is a little Q&A section where you can drop your comments, and feel free to give little shout outs to where you're hailing from today. So, but I'm going to focus in on a couple of things with Dustin to begin with, just to sort of set things up, get the juices and mind flowing about insurance. I'm an MSP like many of you, and I've got questions, I've got concerns, and it's certainly something that I didn't start this business ever thinking I was going to ever talk about, Dustin. And maybe we
right.
could just kind of start there. Like, I was joking around with somebody the other day, like, hey, I got my computer information science degree a million years ago. And, I was all about application development, networking. I love the bits and the bytes. And now I'm talking quite a bit about liability, risk, insurance. I mean, can you just give a quick temperature on what kind of things are we facing as MSPs in that regard? Do we need to start learning how to speak insurance?
Yeah, I think at least a little bit. The biggest part I've been coaching everybody for the last couple of years has been at least on the defensive, because my thing has been if you're not talking to your customers about it, somebody else is. So started off with just the insurance agents, and then suddenly your customers come back to you with like this vulnerability scan. Hey, Robert, they said this port is open. We all know how poor those vulnerability scans end up being a lot of times, but just
Right.
having that conversation. But now you're seeing not just other MSPs talking about it, but we're also seeing these companies. Acrisure is one of my favorite examples.
Hmm.
Acrisure. They are an insurance agency that has bought several MSPs.
Oh,
Yeah, and they're huge. They're primary, so they're like a $4 billion company. Their primary customers are 50 seats and under. So that is like square in the crosshairs.
wow.
So we all talking MSPs, right? We want to be the trusted advisor. A lot of us work our way up to that. That's great. But unfortunately, the reality is that insurance guy walks in the door, he's usually just trusted advisor by default. So suddenly having those conversations, coming in from the insurance side first, that's a bit of a challenge. So I've been
Mm.
telling everybody is you got to be having those conversations because you have to be on the defense from other MSPs, insurance agencies, these hybrid companies like that. And then we'll see, a lot more of these carriers starting to actually sell security services as well.
Very insightful there, Dustin. I think it was, probably my first run-in with you, as well as some other folks that we know in the industry who also have great knowledge about this, that I actually started to incorporate after hearing that advice, incorporating the cybersecurity insurance policy sort of conversation into our QBRs, or what we call our SBRs, which is sort of an annual assessment. Is that the time to do it, you think, like when you're having a strategic conversation, or do you think MSPs should, do some other ad hoc kind of campaign around that?
So talking my best practices, again, having the MSP. So
Yeah.
I'm not saying my way is the right way, but everybody else is doing it wrong. So I like to, whenever we onboard, that's one of our processes is, hey, we need to copy your
Mm,
policy, get the information. Then that gives us an idea where we can look at the date of the renewal, right? So say it's coming up in 60 days after onboarding the customer. Yeah, you need to have that conversation ad hoc immediately. But otherwise, baking into the QBRs. The nice thing on it too is a lot of people say, okay, it's on the defense, but hey, Dustin, can you pay me? Right? I want to get paid for doing insurance introductions. The answer is no.
right.
There's been a bunch of people try to do it different ways. There's fines, there's this, that, and the other. Like, stop trying to do that, please. But what you can do is use that. In last November, I went to Net Diligence, is like the big cyber insurance conference. I'm at Net Diligence. There's 4 sessions. 2024, Robert, it's going to be the year of MDR. I was like, guys, what the hell? So we've been Huntress partners since early 2019 on the MSP side.
Right.
That's great. It's already there. So that's where I say the insurance thing is awesome from the QBR, the cybersecurity standpoint, because we can sit there screaming about MFA till we're blue in the face. The minute they get that app, they go, Robert, why the hell is an MFA on?
Right.
We're about to have that where you do have MDR holdouts on your clients. You're going to see that come up a lot more. Insurance is going to be pushing it.
Yeah.
Like, use that, weaponize it, right? Okay, hey guys, insurance is asking about this stuff. I need to sit down. I need to talk to you about Huntress again. So from that perspective, baking into your QBRs, insurance almost kind of builds the basic roadmap for you, right? Those fundamental security controls.
Yeah, it feels like there's a little bit of a disconnect when I'm looking at these applications that I have to fill out. I mean, they get some things right. I don't want to make insurance companies out to like these, bad guys, or they don't understand our business, or, because they're obviously, big companies making lots of money. So they must be doing something right. But those applications sometimes feel like there's a disconnect between what they're asking for and reality. Can you speak to some of those items? And is MDR, like what you just said, one of them?
Yeah, so they can definitely talk about that. My running joke has been that whenever I go to these insurance things, I'm usually the smartest cybersecurity guy in the room. And that was Robert will tease me for this. That's not supposed to be a brag. That's just the bar is that low in a lot of cases. So the way that stuff comes up is 2 pieces. They're looking at large sets of data, right? Thousands and thousands of policies. So great example is, and I say this as somebody who has multiple exchange certifications, running your own exchange server right now is dumb. Like
Right.
99.9% of businesses shouldn't be doing it. Insurance figured that out because they started looking at, the number of claims that they had, and oh my God, that, everybody that says they have exchange ends up putting in a claim. So we're going to start flagging it. That took a couple of years. You've really seen the last 2 years where they've started just kind of putting a hard line in the sand on that. So that's part of it where they do have good data. A lot of the other stuff, though, to your point of it doesn't make sense, is they're looking at take the average small business. I don't mean the average small business protected by your MSP, my MSP, but
Right.
like your average small business on Main Street that's 6 people. It's a retail shop. They have no MFA. They have none of that stuff. So
Right.
insurance is that cybersecurity poverty line, right? We've talked about that. Just like having those basic good controls in place,
Hmm.
average small business is going to be way below that. So they're just trying to drag it's 18, 24 months behind what all the people on this call are doing and know already. They're just trying to drag these guys out of the gutter. So it's throw a little bit at the wall. To me, the sane way to do it would be just have those core controls, make them mandatory, but insurance still has to be able to grow, expand, make money kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's not a hard line, but that's where you see a lot of stuff where you're like, this seems kind of crazy. Is keep in mind their average, cybersecurity sucks in the sense of dealing with it. They're just trying to drag a lot of these guys out of the gutter.
Right. So like, I guess as a follow up to that is, do you feel like the insurance can help us either with selling or with prevention? I mean, are the things that they're asking for truly the things that we should be doing?
If you are an MSP and using insurance applications to drag your security forward, and I don't mean dragging your customers, but if you're looking at it and going, oh, dude, like, this is a good idea, you probably need to take a hard look in the mirror because they're, again, pretty behind. But where it does help us is, again, going into those customers and saying, nope, insurance. So our help desk here at my MSP is trained whenever somebody says, hey, I want you to turn off MFA, the default response is template and says, your cyber insurance won't allow that. We did find that somebody didn't have cyber insurance recently because they said, I don't have that, turn it off now, damn it.
Mm,
But
yeah.
from that perspective is it helps keep that, again, the poverty line, right? It helps keep them there. It helps get them there kind of thing.
Right.
But from an MSP standpoint, the data is useful to a degree. There's some good signals and stuff, but they're perpetually 12, 18 months behind. You shouldn't be using that to build your roadmap. Maybe some slight adjustments there, maybe some justifications, but no, it's at least I think the next 2 years, insurance is going to be continue to be behind the actual cybersecurity practitioners.
Right, because it sounds like they are reactive to the types of claims that they're finding.
Yeah.
Is that a good way
Yeah,
to
so
say
they
it?
look at the end of the year, they look at the claims data and they go, oh man, we had a bunch of, this, that, and the other. You're probably going to see around the carriers that get hit by a CrowdStrike outage,
Yeah.
right? That system failure, that wasn't something that came up before. That wasn't something that was considered. I'll awkwardly brag, not intentionally, but our policy actually covered that. That was cool to
Mm,
say.
yeah,
But there were
nice.
carriers that didn't. So the guys that had to do those payouts, they're going to look and you might see a question, and it's going to be 12 months from now of, do you have staged updates for, do you have a testing group? Do you have, God forbid, do you have a QA group for your updates, Robert?
Yeah.
Again, stuff that you and I have known for years. This is a good idea. I don't push patches out to every single person at the same time. But that kind of thing, because they have that claims data. So now it's how do I react to that?
Right,
Which,
right.
property insurance, fire hasn't changed that much in 100 years. They've made improvements in construction, but fire is still fire. Versus cybersecurity, where it's okay, great. We just figured out how to get really good at backup restoration for ransomware. Oh, great. Now they're doing extortion attacks.
Mm,
Somebody will figure out we've seen all the AI stuff in Zoom, the impersonations and all that. Somebody will figure out a good defense for that, right? As insurance starts figuring out that that's something they need to protect against. And then everybody will have moved on to the next thing at that point. So
right.
just the reactionary nature of it makes it kind of hard to be cutting edge.
Yeah, and it feels like as an MSP, when I'm having these conversations with my clients, it almost feels like the conversation is constantly changing, right? And nobody really likes that rate of change, right? Like, but last time we talked about, this is all we needed. Now we need something else, right? I call it going back to the well over and over again.
Yeah.
That I have to keep asking my clients to, up their security. Now, I think, we've got a good conversation going with it, and we set those expectations ahead of time. I guess maybe there isn't a question here, as more as just this general comment that it to I guess reemphasize what you said, that it is sort of, we're still in that reactionary mode and they're still learning. All right, I have a question, somewhat selfishly, but I know this is on a lot of MSPs' minds. And it's the question of whether or not we should mandate that our prospects and clients have their own cyber liability insurance policy. And let me just refine that question before I know you're chomping at the bit on that one, but is there a should I decline a prospect from signing up if they don't have a policy?
So this is one of the reasons Kelvin of Cyberdrain and I made a pact with each other that we're keeping our MSPs. We're not going to go full vendor ever, because it gives us kind of that real world experience
Yeah.
that we get to go through the same stuff. So speaking personal experience, our contracts say it's required. It maybe not day one. It says within a reasonable period of time. And my thought process on that is twofold. First of all, stuff happens, right? It's a question of when, not if. We've heard that forever. But whenever that does happen, first off, I don't want it to hit my insurance, if it does come down to being contentious. The second part, though, is so everybody talks about, all right, Robert, I'm going to talk to you. We're going to tell you, stuff's going to happen. It's when, not if. You got to be ready. We're going to be resilient, this, that, and the other. In the heat of the moment, that your client's going to be pissed off. Like there's no two ways about it, that kind of thing. So what can
I
we
know a
do?
little bit about that, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so there's only so much prep you can do ahead of time, but what can we do in the thick of it to reduce the pain and having, okay, as an MSP, let's say we're super elite, we can come in, we can lock down the attackers, we can restore, blah, 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 blah. There's still that financial coverage. So the way that we look at cyber insurance is if you take like the NIST, the CSF phases, right? Insurance covers that respond and recover with an emphasis on recover financially.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I like to mandate it is whenever you do need it. And there's actually, I just found out that the video is not on there anymore, but we used to be the Huntress EDR page. Whenever you click it was my MSP. We were the battle testing on that. That customer that we went through that with was, we had a great reaction. Huntress gets most of the credit. Attacker got a foothold, locked it down in 15 minutes. Customer wasn't happy. They're never going to be. But at that point, insurance came in, did all the forensics and stuff, less than 24 hours. And that was, they were mostly happy with us, but they were also really happy they had insurance because it was such a minimal interruption on it. That was 3 years ago, I think. Still a customer, still super happy. They give us references all the time. So just from that perspective is, yeah, put it in your contracts. But it's a good, because when the stuff happens, that's one less thing they're going to be pissed off at you about.
Yeah. Well, just as a sort of a tangential question to this, and by the way, there's a couple questions in the Q&A. I want to get to those. So I know if you put a question in there, thanks for your patience. I'll get to them in a second here. But as a follow-up to that question, won't my policy, and I already know the answer, doesn't my policy protect my clients?
Maybe, I guess it depends. So you already knew the answer on that. I'm going to give you the super insurance answer. It depends. So it's going to be based off of, was there a mistake in the delivery of your services? One of the other things we have in our contract is that they have to have MFA turned on. So let's use a, really blatant example. Co-managed client goes in, IT guy turns off MFA, they get breached. Okay, where does that fall, right? So in that case, you know what? Robert and Dustin had MFA enforced for everybody. The IT admin went in and overrode it. Like, that's probably your insurance is going to say, no, that wasn't a failure on delivery of services. So
right.
Absolutely. It's whenever you get in the gray areas or the, I had a CEO the other day tell me, if you feel so strongly about it, come after me in court kind of thing, where it's just, whenever you get into that, even if you did the right thing, you said the right thing in the contracts, can't always win. So Eric Tildes has a phrase that he says, belts and suspenders and suspenders. So it's the, protect yourself, make it explicit, and then, hey, add some additional language to protect yourself some more. So.
Right. And by the way, you said something in there about lawsuits. In our particular case, we got sued. We got sued, even though I had plenty of proof that the client in that particular case during our big incident had taken it upon themselves to do their own recovery and, demanded some things of us. And then when things didn't go well, they blamed us. Right.
Yeah.
And so we ended up getting that settlement almost down to zero. But the moral of that story is they still sued me and I still had to defend myself. Yeah.
People are a-holes.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to cuss too much on this one, even though it's a Huntress. But people are going to do stupid stuff. So it's, the stealing Eric Tildes things, it's belts, suspenders, and suspenders.
Yeah.
We're going to have it in the contract. They're going to have insurance. We're going to have insurance. Knock on wood, we should be, okay in the end then.
Yes. All right. Let me try to pick up a question here from Kirk. They use QBRs to specifically target their cyber liability insurance. They bring it up. We bring up when their policy is within 3 months of renewal, if their limits might be too low, if there are gap concerns, and can set up an introduction with Fifth Wall to get a comparative quote. Besides the above questions, specifically on cyber insurance, should there be other cyber liability insurance questions we should add? It sounds like he's trying to build out the cyber incident response guides.
Yeah. So I'm not sure how Fifth Wall does it these days. One of the things that I would add in, though, was look at so one of the biggest headaches that you're going to have is when there's a claim, the incident response people comes in. If anybody has horror stories, please, on this, by the way, drop it into chat. These are always a really interesting conversation. Claims team comes in. I'm going to pick on Robert for a minute. Right. So, okay, your customer got ransomed. Well, you know what? Progressive, and I've had this happen before where it's like literally the second day of recovery. the sales guy from the claims team comes in. Well, you know what, Robert, if you had had our 24/7 SOC service, it would have been stopped.
Yeah.
The last one, I actually got pulled into the call and I was just like, what the hell? Huntress literally stopped it. Like MDR did what it's supposed to do, guys.
Yeah.
What is that? But that's where a lot of MSPs have pain point on the claim side of it. So one piece on these policies is they have what's called a panel. So there is a group of companies that the insurance carrier has pre-approved to do this incident response work. Some are very friendly to MSPs and others are just very aggressive sales pros. So looking at that kind of thing, who's on there, who would work well, because whenever you have those claims, you can actually request. Neat random fact, Coalition has their own in-house claims team that can save you like your deductible, basically. So you have a Coalition policy, your customer does $5,000-$10,000. Coalition's internal claims team is not very aggressive. They're not going to come in and displace. They're going to say, oh, cool, we got MDR here already. Good job, guys. Versus some of the others that are actively trying to sell a 24/7 SOC, things like that. So that's one of the pieces of advice I tell people is, as you're digging into that second layer, have that incident response plan. But if you really want to dig into that second layer, see who the customer's carrier is, look at the people on panel. You're welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn, whichever. I can give you some feedback on it. Not going to get into it with the panel providers here, but there's some that are really friendly with MSPs, some aren't. But that way you can put in, okay, we're going to call up Coalition. Here's the policy number. Here's the response line, and make sure to ask for Coalition internal incident response.
Hey, I've heard people say you should be talking to, and I hate the term, which is sort of silly because you're not supposed to say the B word, but you should be talking to breach counsel long before you actually need them. So is that a thing? Do we call up our cyber liability insurance carrier and say who's on panel and can we have conversation with them ahead of time? And if so, like what sort of, what are some of those things we should be talking to them about?
Yeah, so you absolutely can. The one of the pieces to be careful of, and this goes into, I think, one of the things we're going to cover later, is a lot of the insurance. So there's two aspects of it outside of the financial insurancy part, right? You have reactive services, meaning a claim is happening,
Right.
oh God, fire drill. The other part is the proactive services. So you'll see those marketplaces, or the thing that's driving us all nuts. Part of the reason I started Beltex was they're selling stuff to our customers, our mutual customers, right? The policyholders. Hey, you can do X, Y, and Z. So you'll have some to where it's the actual breach coach that handles the claim side of it, but you'll have other ones. A lot of times they call it risk engineering. Yeah, and by the way, Robert, did you know Symantec is still fully up and kicking amazingly?
Does that company still exist?
Yeah, it does. And there's a couple of major carriers. You can get 2 hours complimentary risk engineering with a Symantec salesperson as part of your policy.
Right.
So, but be careful whenever you're doing that, because you may end up on the proactive services side of the fence where it turns into a sales call. But yeah, you can do. It'll be a limited amount. It's not like you can go get a lawyer for free for 3 hours.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting a day long, 2 day long conversation, but
Yep. But no,
that
that's
whole
absolutely
idea of
because
what did you call it? What was that term again? Something a risk engineer?
yeah, risk engineering.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and that can be useful. So I love that kind of stuff. We write policies mostly for MSPs and their customers, but we still do some outside of it. I did a Florida HOA association the other day. So for those smaller companies where they don't have an MSP, or maybe they have like a really green IT guy, that stuff's useful. Generally on the MSP side, though, the proactive services are competing with us. They're not MSP friendly, that kind of thing. So that's why I bring that up, is just, whenever you go to have those conversations, make sure it's clear. Am I talking to your risk engineering, your marketplace, or am I talking to the claim side of it, depending on where you want to be?
Yeah.
Just because there's the different components included.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. There's a couple other questions in the Q&A section. If you have questions, remember, drop them in Q&A. If you are on LinkedIn or listening to us via YouTube, just put it in the comments. We have a moderator in the background that's going to copy paste those into the Q&A stream here. But a question from Brock is, how do we prepare our clients that need to have this as a budget line item, right? And specifically, and I know where he's going with this, where there's no tangible return on investment, right? Is this just spending more money that the SMBs simply just don't have, right? We're going to ask them to spend another couple of grand a year in premium, on a cyber policy that feels like it doesn't have an ROI. But go ahead, Dustin.
Yeah, I mean, if you're lucky, yeah, there's zero ROI, right? That's our ideal world. You don't ever have to use it. But the way that I've had the most success on it is to say, okay, guys, look, if me and Robert at Progressive, pretend we're just, cybersecurity rock stars, something happens, we're gonna, stop it in its tracks. We're gonna only have you down for 20 minutes kind of thing. Great. But you're a medical company, right? So at that point, you're obligated to do a bunch of stuff by HIPAA, a bunch of stuff by the Attorney General, forensics, legal. You're going to have regulatory fines because something happened. That's not in our contract. You sure as hell don't want me and Robert getting out there doing PR, doing your legal work, that kind of thing. So look at all the services outside of the IT piece that the cyber insurance policy covers. Business interruption is one of the coolest things. We have some limited liability in our contract. So maybe I'm not promising that I'm going to pay anything. I didn't put it in the contract. If you sue me, you might be able to get a little bit. Or here with cyber insurance policy, I mentioned earlier, like ours covered CrowdStrike. If you were down for 4 days on CrowdStrike and you typically would bring in $10,000 a day, insurance cuts you a $40,000 check for that outage on top of all the recovery, that kind of thing. So approaching it from the security standpoint, I personally have kind of given up that fight for the most part, because most of the SMBs are going to say, well, I got an MSP here that can do it, or, we can recover it, whatever. It's around the financial, the regulatory, the legal, all the other stuff that IT guys just don't do.
Yeah.
So that's one good way to approach it that I've had a lot of success with.
The one thing that I'll just add to that from my own experience is that I try to liken it to auto insurance. Like, I hope to God I never have to use my auto policy, but like when that premium comes, I don't like to pay it, but damn it, I'm going to pay that thing because really bad things can happen if I don't have it.
Yeah,
right?
You're not running around driving into stuff. It's the idiots running around driving into you that are the problem, right?
Right, exactly. All right,
Unless you're one of those guys that's running around driving into.
There's no proof of that. Let's just say that. Let me go to the Q&A and pick up a question from Steven. He's asking about is there a list anywhere of the top 5 MSP friendly incident response firms, or is this something that is part of a policy and you just get assigned? Like, how does that work? And
yeah, so yep, you're going to see there's like 30 or so firms that are kind of doing it consistently across the board for lots of carriers, but each carrier has their own little list. On MSP friendly, the 2 that I'll say that I absolutely love, Blue Team Alpha is one of them. They actually were an MSP originally. So they get what we do. They'll stay out of the way. One of the huge carriers has a rule that they only allow people to be either on the proactive or reactive side. And with BTA, they're the one exception that they let them be on both sides of it because they're not salesy at all. So that's a pretty huge endorsement to me, that they made an exception for the rule on those guys. The other one that I like a lot from that perspective is Surefire Cyber.
Okay.
So there's 2. I don't know if I can say 5.
Okay.
But most of that, it's one of those things of, I feel like we kind of have this in the MSP industry too, where it's like, who are your favorite vendors? And you got a couple that are up there of, Huntress and FlexPoint. And then, which vendors don't you like? And it's like, all right, let me count the ways of.
We're not going to do that here.
Yeah. But yeah, Blue Team Alpha and Surefire Cyber are 2 of my favorites from that perspective.
Very cool. Very cool. And I would also imagine that, if you press hard enough into your policy that they're going to tell you who's paneled. Yeah. Is that correct?
Yep.
For
you can write in and say, hey, can you give me a list of panel providers? That's like normally a PDF. Some of them even have it on their website. Research, ask around the community. I'll be a little bit more spicy. If you want to shoot me direct messages, go find me on LinkedIn, or you can email me.
Okay. I've got another question here, and this one I know is going to touch a nerve for you.
I've been eyeballing it for.
It's like
spicy.
Yeah, he's Dustin mentally has bolded this in red and increased the font size to like 100. Thoughts on cyber warranty? Or let me twist the question a little bit so Dustin doesn't lose his mind here. Warranties versus insurance. Can you explain the difference?
Yeah, so there's actually going to be 3 different categories here. I'm going to start from most narrow, I guess is the way to put it. So embedded warranty. is something like Sentinel One has it. Arctic Wolf is another example. So it's by buying this product, it is included by default. It's an opt-out thing. It is super narrowly scoped. So Sentinel One is my favorite example to use because they're huge. It's public on their website. So Sentinel One is going to specifically only cover like ransomware attacks, I think is literally. And it's $1 million warranty, but it has a couple specific carve-outs in it, or not carve-outs, restrictions in it, $1,000 per endpoint. So you got 20 seats, you get a ransomware attack, Sentinel One has to be configured best practices as defined by them. So, okay, great, we checked all the boxes, $20,000. I say on those, it's a cherry on top. Like that's all it is. And that's all they intended it to be too, right? It's our product failed. Sorry, my bad, here you go.
Yeah, but it's not bad. I mean,
yeah,
it's kind of interesting, but it sounds like someone shouldn't substitute that for true coverage. Yeah.
Yes. These standalone warranties that we're starting to see come to market a lot, we'll dive a little bit more into those. I call it pseudo insurance. It reads a lot like an insurance policy. It's not technically tied to anything that you're seeing. They're normally tying it to like some services. But whenever I say an embedded warranty, it's explicitly tied to Sentinel One, right? Versus these standalone warranties, it's tied to EDR, right? That's generic. I could be using Huntress. I could be using, I shouldn't pick on vendors. I could be using a garbage EDR product and it checks the same box, right? That's not really, from an underwriting perspective, that's like I'm sitting here going, okay, a Yugo and a BMW i8 are the same thing. It's a car. Of course I can do $100 a month for insurance. So there's a flawed premise from that standpoint, I think. And again, the standalone warranties, it's a little bit more narrow. And then we get to a true standalone insurance product, which is going to have a lot more coverages, is what you would think of it, right? We're not just going to cover ransomware. We're not just going to cover business email compromise. We're also going to cover financial crimes. We're going to cover business interruption. We're going to cover multimedia liability. There's a lot. It's a lot broader of a product. So you kind of go from embedded, super narrow, standalone, a little bit wider. Insurance is, a full thick policy is going to cover a lot of different stuff.
Right. So I guess you have to match what your needs are to.
Yeah. Well, so the customer as the buyer, I don't think anybody should be using just an embedded warranty, like absolutely full stop.
Yeah, that just like you said, it seems like just, it's like gravy or cherry on the top, right?
If your business is important enough that you care about the EDR embedded warranty, like you need a full cyber insurance policy.
Right.
How I feel about standalone insurance. I'm not going to talk about that, but on the standalone warranty, so two parts of it. I think there is a really niche use case for it. If you look at micro businesses, so if you have a 5-person, retail shop, an embedded warranty that they pay, $50, or sorry, a standalone warranty they pay like $50, a couple $100 a year. There's definitely a use case for that. My big problem with the standalone warranties are a couple different pieces. There are still a ton of restrictions. They are designed to very minimally, very rarely pay out. They conflict with insurance in a lot of cases. So you're going to have stuff of your insurance policy. It's called the other insurance clause. There's your nerdy term for the day, but it's other policy goes first. And then you'll see in a lot of these to where on the warranty thing, it even says if this is found to be insurance, it's null and void.
Oh,
like there's a ton of gotchas in it. So not a fan of that. But my biggest piece where I'm like, all right, guys, this is scary. As an MSP, you're selling a standalone warranty. Now, even though, they're going to call the warranty provider, it's fine. You just put yourself in the middle of it, right? You sold something. So full stop. It's just like selling a piece of software. You would never argue, I just sold it to you. Like the customer is going to look at you for liability.
Yeah.
I have yet to find an MSP insurance carrier that says that is a covered service. All of them come back and say, you know what, Robert, if you're going to sell those warranties, you need to either have financial services coverage, or the one that made me laugh is a couple of them said you need a insurance agency coverage.
Wow.
So shouldn't happen, but let's say worst case, we got our little $500,000 standalone warranty. Customer has a ransomware breach. They also have a standalone cyber policy. The warranty covers it. As the MSP, we come in, we do some work. The warranty also provides this, that, and the other. Oh shit, we just hit $500,000. This is actually going to be $1 million thing. We're going to our actual insurance. Insurance comes in. I mentioned earlier, those conflicts, right? That something's null and void, something's not covered, that kind of thing. the customer suddenly sitting there saying, either my insurance was reduced or the standalone warranty is not going to actually work for us. It's not paying out. Who do you think they're going to be pissed off at? The guy who sold them the warranty.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's my big hang up on those. There's some of them to where you can do kind of behind the scenes where it's like, if you don't sell it, I still am not a big fan of it, but I don't think it's dangerous. It's the selling it part of it that kind of scares me, where it's, hey, this is a service we're providing. You as an MSP are putting yourself in the middle.
So
And the upside
your
is
name
like,
to it.
so yeah, I mean, just, talking because I have an insurance policy that we sell our own. I mean, we have sometimes where it goes under $1,000. So the whole argument of, oh, we're going to sell this standalone warranty, insurance is too expensive. The standalones are like $4,000 a year. Like they're not that cheap. Our average policy is $3,000. So you're getting into actual insurance territory, and it doesn't add the liability to it.
I couldn't help think of the Latin phrase caveat emptor, right? Let the buyer beware.
Exactly.
And this is it goes back to what I said early in this conversation, how I opened up with, it feels like, I got into the tech business because I love tech and I love helping people, right?
Yeah.
I love computers, right? Which is true. But now I've got to educate myself on this whole other sphere of knowledge and understand as a business owner, as an MSP, how I navigate that and who I align with and what sort of exposure I may unknowingly expose myself to, right? Or take on liability that I didn't even realize was mine to begin with, right?
Right. Yep.
That's
I wanted to address real quick. Somebody mentioned in the comments, warranty is a refund for the product not working. It's nothing like insurance. Sort of, and that's where I say it's a little bit of a pseudo insurance. I'm in the process. We're actually building a embedded warranty for someone right now. It is 100% insurance on the back end. Every warranty there on the other side of it has an agent that is involved and has reinsurance plugged into it. So it is 100% I'll call it an insurance adjacent product at the minimum. There's different types. There's different types of insurance. You could think of a warranty as another type of insurance, but no, it's definitely a section of insurance. There's a couple of the carriers have entire divisions that just deal with warranties.
All right, we're going to pivot a little bit, and I'm going to go to Chris S. here. He's got a question that is sort of near and dear to my own heart because I've had the same frustration. And he says, we help clients with cyber insurance applications. Some providers and client partners have a short list of EDR, XDR platforms that they allow. How do we get Huntress on that short list? I've never seen Huntress on a drop list.
Yeah, no, that's been near and dear to my heart also, and something that I've been, working towards, for a couple of years.
Yep.
Bringing it up, right? You can do, whenever you put in the applications, you can do write-ins on that stuff. That's one of the pieces for the people that are paranoid about the applications of, do you have EDR? Yes or no?
Mm-hmm.
I would say, attach a sheet to the end of it that says, here's the products we're using kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's going to be momentum to a degree. And then the other part is, so everybody's always like, how do they pick these lists? It's not some big conspiracy. It actually is dumber in a lot of cases, unfortunately. Or maybe that's better. I don't know. But you'll see a lot of times where the people at the carriers have worked with the product before, that they're seeing it a ton coming up, things like that. Or they have, I mentioned earlier, the proactive services, right? The Symantec engineers are sitting there saying, oh, this one's great, use this kind of thing. It's not some backroom deal. It's not that Kyle needs to go cut a $1 million check to Travelers Insurance to get on the list kind of thing.
Yeah.
So you guys being vocal about it, bringing it up, making sure that the agents know, please pass on to the underwriters that we're using Huntress, that kind of thing, is going to be the best way to do that.
Yeah.
The other piece too that ties into is be aware on some of these to where they're pushing. We're starting to see these guys get into the managed security market. So that's another thing where it's like they're going to be hard pressed. I'm not saying it's malicious, but it's not in their best interest, right? You're sitting there trying to sell MDR. Why are you going to add more MDR providers? So I think it's going to be a bit of a uphill battle. And I am actively avoiding. So, we try to do our policy first, selfishly. I think it's great.
Yeah.
But we write these other carriers, but the ones that have their security services, I try not to do those with MSPs customers because there's a conflict of interest on it. So on those, my whole point on saying that is I think a lot of those carriers that have their own security divisions, you're not going to see them adding Huntress on that just because, they're having to support the SentinelOne, stuff like that. But other than that, why add that whenever they can try to sell their own service?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And we may dive a little deeper into that little thread. It made me think of some other things that we can talk about, but there's a couple other questions here I want to get to. Doug asked an interesting, or kind of set the table for a very interesting question. He's asking us to talk about involving the FBI in incident response and whether that's something you should do or not.
Geez, in general, I don't know. There's probably smarter, more qualified people in here to answer that.
Yeah.
From the insurance perspective, you're going to see them push you to do that in certain cases, and in other cases as well that they're going to require it.
Mm,
My general advice on that, and Doug, I don't mean this as a cop out per se, but it's just like every situation is different, is follow breach counsel's lead on that. If you want to do, I have never heard of a situation where insurance was upset that somebody contacted the FBI.
yeah.
So if you're like, nope, we want to contact the FBI, you're going to be fine in that case. But the breach counsel will normally have advice around, as you kind of start getting more into it, of here's what happened. One interesting piece that came up recently was that one of the carriers is seeing a lot of success that they are doing it very quickly and very early in the process, and they've been able to claw back a significant amount of funds that were stolen.
Yeah,
So
that's the FBI RAT team, the Rapid Asset Recovery Team, or whatever they call that thing. Is that
yeah,
what you're talking about? Their ability to like pull back wire
yeah.
transfers?
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, one of the carriers that does ends up having a lot of claims around the financial crimes that they've said they've started hitting the FBI up super early because they were saying it was some ridiculous number. I was talking to a guy the other day. It was like 40% of the funds they've been able to claw back because of that.
Right. So, by the way, in our incident, Doug, I don't know if you're specifically aware of what happened to my company 3.5 years ago. I was going to say 2.5. It's actually a little longer now. 3.5 years ago, we were at the center of international, cyber attack, and we had 100% of our customers ransomware, including ourselves. 2,500 endpoints, 80 customers. One of the first things I did was to file an IC3 report with the FBI. Now that got me on their radar, but they didn't come in. So I'll just answer your question, perhaps maybe from an experiential level. Nobody showed up here. I mean, they were communicative with us. They wanted to know things. They invited us into some calls, but nobody actually showed up from the FBI to help us out, right? And most of our involvement was with our assigned breach counsel, as well as forensics, and then our own recovery and response to our situation. But it's a good question, Doug. In my opinion, I think that one of the first things that you need to do is at least file the report, because it is a crime when something like that happens, and there should be a report for it, right? And Dustin, you did say that you've never heard of an insurance company get upset that a victim filed a report.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of any way that could hurt you. I mean, yeah, like you said, it's a crime. So I don't, even if somebody was upset, I'd be hard pressed to find how that would be, a negative towards you on that.
Right, right. I'm going to jump kind of back to some of the questions that I had prepared, because while you were talking earlier, I had a couple of random thoughts pop in my head. And one of them was around claims. I've heard people say that insurance doesn't want to pay claims. How true or untrue is that, Dustin?
So we do want to pay claims. We don't want to pay big claims, right? Because I mean, it looks bad. That's the whole reason. What do you see on the news? Robert, when was the last time you saw a news article that was like insurance pays claim and makes company whole and happy again, right?
Never.
Yeah, it's always the bad stuff. So my thing has been, we want to pay claims. As part of designing our Beltex policy was we were looking at like, where can we take $600,000 claims down to 60K, right? I'll be honest with that, right? I don't want to pay out big claims. I want to pay out small claims.
Right.
So it's reducing that. We got two things we can do from that perspective. We can prevent claims in the first place, which is great, but we're putting a lot of energy into what can we do to reduce the claims whenever they happen. And that's been with if we go back to like the ransomware stuff, right? The ransomware pandemic, 2020, 21 kind of thing, just as it skyrocketed,
Yep.
was you did see a ton of huge attacks. Because we were all, whenever I say we, IT guys, we're all nerding out on here's the latest, firewall, here's the latest antivirus. It's all prevent. I mentioned earlier, MSP side, we started with Huntress early 2019, and people thought I was crazy. And they're like, why the hell are you buying a thing that only just detects once the hackers are in? Just keep the hackers out. I just thought it was cool at the time. I'm not pretending I'm some big visionary on it, but you've seen a lot of shift to these, we put a lot more effort into the detect side of it, respond, recover piece of it. So same thing on the insurance side is you don't want to deny. It's not a badge of honor to say we had 0 claims. Like that actually kind of seems sketchy, even talking to other insurance people.
Yeah.
You want to have some claims, but you want to have the smaller claims. So that part is absolutely true. We want to pay out smaller claims, but it's a bit backwards of what everybody would assume is you do want to actually show, if we go through a year and we say we have 0 claims, then at that point, you might be inviting regulators, scrutiny. It's kind of an odd thing to go. We talked earlier about the embedded warranties. One of the big companies said, we paid out 0 claims. Their intention was to say, our warranty we include with our product, it was supposed to be our product's so badass we didn't have any claims.
You didn't have to have any, right?
How
Yeah.
do you think everybody took that though?
Yeah, they took it as that they were being cheap or reneging on their promise, right?
Exactly. So no, we want to pay out claims, but we just want them to be the smaller ones because the detection, the reactive services did their job.
So this also begs the question, and you're kind of answering it, but I want to be very pointed about this one. Whose side is insurance on? Are they on my side because I've paid a premium, or are they looking out only for their best interests?
Depends on where they live on the great pyramid of insurance, right?
Okay.
Man, I should have had slides. So the big piece to look at is, are they an agency? Are they an agent? You'll hear brokers, producers, all that fun stuff. But like with Beltex, we're actually, so fun bit of insurance nerd trivia for you, is I mentioned we have our own policy. We legally don't own that policy. What we did was we worked with a carrier to design it, and then we have exclusive distribution rights. Literally nobody else can get it. So legally, by regulation, if I sell that policy to somebody, I represent them, not the carrier, which I absolutely love because that means I can sit and fight with the carrier on behalf of my customer. And legally, I have to. I can't sit there. This is the good part about regulation, guys, right? It sucks. You can't get paid, blah, 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 blah. On the other side of it, the carrier piece of it, there's a lot of regulation in place. I just renewed my license. I had to learn way too much about this stuff through all the continuing education. There's certain safeguards on it, but yeah, I mean, ultimately, let's not sit here and say the world's perfect. Everybody's doing the ideal thing. The carrier is going to represent their interests.
Right.
But that's why insurance is so regulated to make sure that they can't just blatantly screw you on it.
Yeah.
So I think that's as honest as I can get on that answer.
Well, I can offer from direct experience. All I can say is that I've seen plenty to see evidence of both ways, right? Here's the check, or here's half the money, or a quarter of the money you're looking for, but all this other stuff we're declining, and then a battle ensues, and it can feel that way, and I think that's where the question is emanating from. I think most people are distrustful of insurance.
Yeah, and I'll actually use my personal experience. I went through with auto. Is the whole what is it, Robert? You'll know the saying is "Don't assume malicious where incompetence can explain it."
Oh yeah.
I had a problem to where my wife totaled her car, so they told us go get a rental, and her thing was whatever amount they gave us, there wasn't like anything available. So she went back to our auto carrier and said, "Hey guys, this is going on. Can we get? I got 3 kids." And she's like, I can't fit into a subcompact and, do this, that, and the other. And so they put in writing, they said, yep, that's no problem as long as it has the same number of seatbelts. She had a 3-row SUV. So we went in, we got the bigger car, got it in writing. We asked permission. We did the right thing. Whenever we went to pay the claim, or whenever they went to pay the claim, they said, you maxed out your limits. We said, whoa, hold on a minute. What the hell? And they talked through everything. And they're like, yeah, we did this, this, and this. And they showed the rental thing. And so I said, hold on a second, guys, you approved this outside of the original thing. I got it in writing. And the whole problem ended up being, and I actually had to go to the Department of Insurance to complain. That's the Texas insurance exam does not have a single question about cyber. So this is the only time I've ever gotten use out of my insurance license from a practical personal standpoint. But so I ended up having to go back to the Department of Insurance, and it was at this big, huge auto carrier. It's one of the ones you see on commercials with animals and caveman and stuff. They hadn't talked internally. They never filed that statement into my binder or whatever. So they didn't know. As soon as I did that and I submitted this stuff, like 3 days later, bam, they said, oh yeah, here's the check for the remaining balance. No problem.
Yeah, but most people don't take it to that level because most people don't have the knowledge that you do. And that's the scary part about this stuff is that even myself, as well as, the many others that are tuned in here, we don't have the bandwidth for this stuff. We don't there aren't enough brain cells in our heads to store all this information.
And that goes back to your question, who does it represent? Get the independent agent, find somebody that knows the space. Good news is the last couple of years, I've gotten to sit here from, there was nobody. Now there's a bunch of options that know the MSP space, that know cyber. You got the agency wholesale level guys, the fifth walls, the data streams. Then there's a handful of us with our own policies. You got options. So find the guys that good customer service that advocate, that'll, Robert will tell you, I love arguing. I'd be happy to get in there and mix it up on a claim.
You don't love arguing. Let's argue about that. I'm just messing with you. There's more questions in the Q&A I want to get to, but I got to squeeze this one in because I know that no one's asked this question, but I know they're all thinking it and they're all feeling it. And as soon as I ask the question, they're going to go, oh yeah, that's right. And it's suddenly insurance companies are starting to creep into our MSP space by offering security services. And I know this because just recently, and I don't mind saying their name, it starts with a C and it ends in an coalition, but one of my customers popped something in my inbox, and it's happened multiple times to me where they said, hey, check this out. Our insurance company wants to, provide these services. And I have to kind of push back and say, we've got all of this. You're actually already subscribed to these things, or, we already do these things for you. It feels like they're trying to muscle in on our turf.
Yep. So they will tell you they're not. There are certain ones that even have MSP partner programs where you can resell their security services. But no, that's absolutely, and it's going to get worse. If you guys want to see, Insurance Nerd Dustin thinks it's a cool idea. But if you want to see, what's the crazy end to this, there's one called Alpha Secure, ELPHA, like an elephant.
Okay.
So you get your Alpha Secure policy. Robert, we're also going to give you our EDR agent, a VPN agent, multi-factor, backups, and I forget the other, a SIM, I think. And it's not, so fun fact, I did find out it's not 100% required, but it's basically like there's one little carve out kind of thing for it. So if you really want to scare the crap out of yourself, go look up Alpha Secure. Good news is
I really don't. I don't want to look. I'd rather just bury my head in the sand, please, at this point.
So no, it's coming up more and more. You're seeing these agencies that are partnering with or buying MSPs. I was at MSSP Alert yesterday. The conference conveniently was here in Austin. I met this guy. He was previously a firewall engineer. They added insurance in, so they're basically a MSSP with a full insurance business. Launched it day one that way. So it was like, yeah, we're going to do cyber. I'm going to come in, talk to them about cyber insurance. Then I'm going to bring in my Palo Altos and, this, that, and the other. And so, yeah, 100%, this is a big threat. What can you do to deal with it? This is a great situation where, you being a little bit more defensive, talking to your customers on it, is you're having those QBRs. They go in for renewal. They bring in the agent goes like, yeah, here's a C with the coalition. There's a number of, see, Robert, I said whenever we were preparing, I told Robert I'm not going to name any carriers.
You didn't.
I have a list of ones that we will write as a last resort because they do conflict with the MSPs. And I say last resort if there's like a substantial cost savings or that kind of thing. But what I don't want to have happen is that, we sell a policy to somebody and then there's conflict. And I don't even mean protecting the MSP, but it just gets weird whenever they're sitting there aggressively selling security services that the customer already has. To your point, they're normally inferior. I haven't really seen anything on the insurance side that there's not a standalone product that's substantially better. It's just not a good. They're looking for, they have an MSP, they have great security. Let's get one of the ones to where it's a just insurance, right? And that was the whole thing that, you know, pissed me off, made me start Beltex, is not, stop trying to sell me stuff. Stop trying to bring in, you know, additional stuff on it. Stop doing these crazy security scans. There's a lot of carriers that work that way, that are just the old school, you know, conservative. One that I'll say that we write business with is Chubb. You probably all have heard it. I think they're the biggest in the world at this point. Like, Chubb is just traditional conservative insurance. They're not sitting there trying to sell 100 products on top of that. There are still a lot of those out there. The InsurTechs, the startup, the trendy ones, that's where you're having these conflicts. And that's the ones that we generally try to avoid if, you know, they have an MSP in place already. I mentioned earlier, homeowners association in Florida. If I remember correctly, we did put them with coalition because, you know, they didn't have an MSP. They weren't protected. They need, and that's a substantial step up. It's like going back earlier, the warranties, right? It's better than nothing. And it's a good insurance policy, but there's just conflicts whenever you have these security services being sold.
Yeah, it's
your agent should be advising you of that, right? Whenever you're partnering with them as an MSP, is, hey man, and I've had to make that phone call before. Hey, we got one of these ones. They're going to be pushing the security stuff. Make sure you talk with your client. I'm going to tell your client also, but this is a good policy. It's the best fit for them. So just a little bit of proactive goes a long way.
Well, I think that's a great piece of advice there, which I'll make sure I say it from my perspective, that you got to align yourself with a good broker. I mean, we refer a lot of business to Fifth Wall because we know that we can work hand in hand with them, that they understand us, they understand our customer, they understand, you know, the insurance, and they're not going to put us in a position where now I've got to try to fight for something back or try to get, you know, a carve out written into a policy. Dustin, we only have a few minutes here, but Brock has got another question in here that I'm going to take and kind of rephrase it just a little bit. But he's asking about, you know, for MSPs that offer cybersecurity, should they also have their own response team and be trained to recover their clients, or is recovery? So let's just paint a pretend picture. Imagine an MSP gets ransomware one day and all their customers are ransomware simultaneously. I know that would never happen, right? Should said MSP then go do the recovery for all of their clients, or is the expectation, if they have cyber, that a recovery team will come in? If they have cyber liability coverage, that another company would be assigned to come in to do the recovery work? Like, should
insurance is always going to provide that recovery team. So I'm not going to go into is the MSP good or bad at it? But you got to sit back. Insurance is in the driver's seat. If you're doing it yourself, you're probably going to run into problems. Get their sign off on it. And I've navigated this from both sides of the house. You can do it. You can get reimbursed with some of the traditional carriers kind of thing. But it's not defined, which is part of the problem, right? You don't know unless you've gone in there. You mentioned earlier, Robert, right? Go and talk to them, talk to the breach coach. But let's be honest, guys, we're all working our ass off on, you know, security, help desk, hiring, sales, printer tickets, whatever. That's a lot more work to do, to sit there, get the customer on the line with the insurance company. Hey, what can we do? What can't we do? Can you put it in writing? I've had success on that, but it's sometimes taken 3 or 4 calls and emails kind of thing. But the general advice, what I think is real world practical advice, is, you know, whenever that happens, isolate and contain very briefly, open the claim, follow the insurance lead. If you did want to get in and do more, there are certain situations where you can do that. But, you know, you're going to need to be a little bit more deliberate, and then that severely limits your choices on who you can, you know, work with. And like Chris R just said, you know, I saw Kivu bring in a firm to help with recovery, competing MSP. That's where you need to be defensive on that stuff, bringing up those conversations, or looking at those, you know, MSP friendly policies. It's not just me out there. There are other ones as well. There's a few of us at least, but yeah, that's the whole reason I ran into this. It's a huge, I don't want to say conflict of interest, but it's a conflict. There's, at a minimum, it's an argument, Robert.
It is an argument. We're going to argue about that in next month when I see you. No, we're not going to argue about it. We'll talk about it. But I guess just as a follow-up to that, I recently spent some quality time with a company that does an MSP who's now morphed into a recovery company. They were actually asking me, because they're West Coast and I'm in New York, they were actually asking me if I had interest to get in on that game. But after talking with them for a while, I realized that's a different business.
Yeah.
The responsiveness, the skill level that you need, the mindset of the technician, because you're working like once you're assigned to a case, you're going like nonstop, 18 hours a day.
Yeah.
You have kids, a spouse, a life. No, you don't. Like you're doing that, and you got to love it, right? Because you just can't do that 100% of the time and for it to not affect your personal life as well. So I understand Brock's question about I want to be the recovery team for my clients and my clients only. But it seemed to kind of bleed into this notion that if I start doing that, it is really you got to think about recovery efforts as different than MSP services. It's not the
Yeah.
same thing.
And so I think I can, I'm trying not to talk about myself a bunch, but I think in this case, it took me 3 years to get this policy put together to give you an idea of where insurance just dug their heels in against it.
Yeah.
And so, again, there's a couple others, but it generally works in the same way is as the MSP, we give you a playbook. Here's what you can do ahead of time. It's very narrow. We still bring in the breach counsel. We still bring in the insurance to give you guys an idea of what the mindset is. On the carrier side, they call it the adult in the room. So that's how they're thinking of us as MSPs. They still bring in an incident response firm, but they also have, hey, Robert, Progressive, you're their MSP. We need you here as well. So, oh God, it's a ransomware attack. Forensics comes in, does their thing.
Yeah.
And then at that point they go, all right, Robert, here's what we need you guys to do. You're going to restore from backup from 3 days ago, blah, 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 blah. Okay, go. Right. So that part of it, the structure, it's bringing in the MSP, but it's also bringing in forensics. Haven't done it, but from everything I've seen and stuff, like that's a completely different skill set, right?
Yeah.
I don't know that many people on this call, if any, should be doing forensic side of it, but
Oh, definitely
we're all
not.
damn good at restoring from backups and pulling logs out as requested, right? That kind of stuff.
Right.
So there's room, but getting in and doing the full thing,
Yeah.
like Robert said, I think it's almost a different industry, different career.
It is a different business, but to Brock's question, like I would want to be the people who are doing the recovery for my client, because I have the relationship and they trust me, and I wouldn't. And it's not even so much. Some people might feel like there's a trust factor here that some other company might use this as a wedge to get in. I'm looking at it as I want to do the recovery properly, because it's not just about bits and bytes. It's about restoring their business so that people are productive, and who has most of that knowledge is me as the MSP. But ultimately, my advice would be, and my experience in doing handling the mass attack that we went through, was listen to the breach counsel, right?
Yeah.
They're essentially going to call the shots. Kind of like what you said, is the insurance company is in the driver's seat. We had to kind of tuck tail and say, okay, what can and can't we do here?
Yeah. Yep. So it's that part of it. There's no good answer on it besides, be proactive, have those conversations.
Right.
The companies that I do know that have pivoted from MSP into incident response, if you pull it off, you got to have the volume. Robert just mentioned earlier, right? It's a full-time thing. If you're telling the carrier I can only do 1 case a month, they're not going to really send you any business. But the couple of guys that I know that have done that is, some of them have turned into those bad guys we talked about, where they're selling the services and kicking the MSP out.
Yeah.
It's definitely not saying to do it, but from the sales perspective, it's fish in a barrel is what I've been told. The insurance companies are literally handing you business, saying, one guy that I know just put a limit. He said, I won't do anything under $300,000 on a project now because they are so damn busy. So it's,
Wow.
if you're good at it, if you have no life, and if you want to go, if you're not ethically, I guess ethically, if you're ethically comfortable doing that, it prints money.
Yeah.
But it's a lot.
Right. All right. So, Dustin, we're a couple of minutes over and I want to wrap us up. So, in 30 seconds or less, any parting thoughts for everybody? Any piece of wisdom or advice that we hadn't covered that you're just dying to get out?
No, I think the biggest piece, as I've been telling everybody, is my session yesterday. Did I tell you the title of it, by the way, Robert?
I'm not sure if you did. You might have.
I did a main session was insurance is evil. Um,
Why does
my
that sound
tune's a little bit,
familiar?
yeah. I'm not saying that's completely true, but it was a good catchy and got a lot of eyeballs. But
Right.
it's here to stay. You can't fight it. It's like the old, I think it was it Rocco's Modern Life? You can't fight City Hall. Like just accept
Yeah. You
it,
can't fight
guys,
City Hall.
right?
Yeah.
So educate, have those conversations, be on the defensive, because whether you want it to or not, it's going to influence a lot of stuff on your business, your customers, security, and all that.
Yeah.
Learn to work with it, learn to take advantage of it.
I will augment your wisdom with my own thought that I've had is for me and everybody who knows me, it's all about peer groups, baby. It's all about the community. It's about plugging into things like this fireside chat. It's about connecting with peers in local settings, in national settings, at conferences. That's why I go, because I've made a lot of great friends like Dustin. I would have never met him had I not been out in the community, meeting people, talking to people, getting introductions, sharing information, being a go-giver, because go-givers often get a lot of information in return. This is, the MSP space is messy, 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 messy. And we're only talking about cyber liability insurance today. There's so many other elements as well. But I want to thank you, Dustin, for your time and sharing your wisdom with everybody here. Being transparent about what you know as well is a wonderful quality about you. And I want to thank the audience. There's still quite a number of you who are online still tuning in here. And I want to just express gratitude and thanks for everybody to investing the time that you have, which is so precious, into learning with us. And then finally, a huge thank you to Becky Teal and to Huntress for trusting me to be the host today. Appreciate the opportunity, and I really hope everybody got a great experience out of today's session. So thank you, be safe, and get insured.
Thanks, everybody.